Você estava ajoelhado diante da bigorna, o calor sufocante da forja envolvendo seu corpo como uma onda implacável. O ar ao seu redor era pesado demais, impregnado pelo cheiro cortante do carvão em brasa, misturado com o suor que escorria pelo seu rosto e grudava a roupa áspera na pele já calejada. Seus dedos, endurecidos por anos de esforço, seguravam o martelo com uma força resignada, enquanto você repetia o gesto cansativo, golpe após golpe, batendo com precisão na lâmina incandescente que começava a tomar forma. O som ritmado do martelar ecoava pela oficina, um tambor constante, acompanhado pelo estalo do fogo e pelo sussurro do vento distante, que parecia carregar consigo o peso silencioso daqueles que haviam passado por essa mesma provação. Você notava as cores apagadas do ambiente. As sombras dançavam nas paredes. De madeira enegrecida, o vermelho brilhante da forja era a única presença viva em meio ao cinza do pó e da fuligem, que subia lentamente, flutuando no ar espesso. Cada respiração trazia para seus pulmões o gosto metálico do esforço extremo, uma lembrança constante de que a forja não tolerava erros. Se uma única gota de suor caísse onde não devia, poderia arruinar tudo, ou pior, era em muitos aspectos uma existência muito diferente da sua vida agora, onde um simples clique no celular oferece mundos inteiros. Aqui cada instante era lutado com o corpo e com a paciência, no ritmo lento e cruel da criação antiga. Um teste não apenas de força, mas de resistência silenciosa, onde a beleza da lâmina era também a sentença que carregava. Você voltou sua atenção para a bigorna, sentindo-a, madeira fria contra o joelho. Um detalhe simples, mas que validava sua presença ali, firme e imóvel, mesmo diante do calor inclemente. Palmadas longas, pesadas, preenchiam o espaço, e o martelar se tornou um mantra. Cada som, cada centelha que saltava da forja, era uma nota na melodia hipnótica da sobrevivência. A pele ardia, a fuligem grudava, e você sabia que o corpo carregava aquele obstáculo eterno, o peso silencioso daquela criação. No meio daquela cadência imutável, algo inesperado aconteceu. Um silêncio repentino caiu sobre a oficina. O estalo do carvão cessou. O martelo parou no ar por um instante. Você percebeu, à distância, um olhar trocado entre as sombras, uma troca súbita e sutil que interrompia a repetição constante. Um som leve, vindo do lado de fora, cortou a monotonia. Um movimento quase imperceptível, mas suficiente para alterar a atmosfera, como se algo estivesse prestes a mudar, mesmo que ninguém ousasse falar. Você permaneceu ali, imóvel, sentindo o ar pesado, o suor contínuo que grudava na pele, o calor inescapável, e só então percebeu que essa pausa não era apenas um momento vazio, era um aviso. Estava na hora de seguir adiante, mas a forja não perdoaria a pressa. O próximo passo exigiria ainda mais cautela. Ei, antes que Morfeu te pegue de vez, dá uma conferida rápida se você continua inscrito. Para alguns, o botão sumiu, e eu não quero que você perca as próximas histórias para dormir. Aproveita e deixa um like macio como um travesseiro. Me conta nos comentários de onde você nos ouve e que horas são aí. Sua interação mantém este cantinho de calma vivo. Valeu por fazer parte. You rose from your knees as the brief silence lingered, the weight of the moment settling deep in your chest. The forge's heat pressed against your skin like a slow river of warmth, neither comfort nor torment, but a force that demanded endurance without haste. Your fingers lingered on the handle of the hammer, still warm from the last strike, the metal glowing faintly beneath the ember's fading glow. Around you, the workshop breathed with quiet anticipation. Shadows clung to the corners, stretching long tendrils across the rough-hewn wooden beams and the worn stone floor. The thick air was seasoned with the scent of molten iron and ash, a bitter tang that clung to your nostrils and clotted your throat with each shallow breath. Yet amid that oppressive atmosphere, your senses sharpened. Every minute sound, every flicker of light became a signal, a message from a world suspended between creation and destruction. You stepped away slowly from the anvil, the wood groaning faintly beneath your weight as you shifted. Your boots left soft imprints in the dust that carpeted the floor, disturbed only lightly by the subtle gusts whispering through the cracked window. The breeze wove a frigid thread through the heat, weaving contrast that prickled your skin. It caught the scent of damp earth and distant rain, mingling with the sweetness of burning charcoal. The sounds from outside were muted, carried incongruously close, as if the world beyond your shelter conspired to pull your attention away from the task at hand. Your eyes traced the curve of the blade resting on the anvil's battered surface. It was no longer a mere strip of metal, but something slowly, painfully born, still raw, but pregnant with potential. The edges held a delicate blush of red, flickering like the slow pulses of a dying ember. You could almost feel it breathe beneath your fingertips, each millimeter aching for patience, for the gradual shaping that only fire and hammer could provide. Reaching out, your hand brushed along the rough surface of the anvil, the coldness biting against the heat lingering in your skin. It grounded you. The rhythm you had fallen into, the repetitive rise and fall of the hammer, the inhale before the strike, the sigh of metal yielding, was temporarily broken, but not lost. Somewhere beyond the reach of your senses, time seemed to unravel itself deliberately, drawing out each moment into a longer thread. You moved toward the small wooden table pushed into the gloom, your steps echoing unevenly, swallowed quickly by silence. Your fingers searched among the scattered tools, files smoothed by use, a tangle of wire bristles, remnants of leather strips softened by sweat and toil. You picked up a rag, heavy with soot, and lifted it to your face. The coarse fabric brushed against your brow, soaking up the slickness of your skin, but it left behind a sharp scent of smoke and iron that held you fast. Your gaze fell again on the blade. It was the first real progress of the day beyond pounding metal. The task ahead was both simple and enormous. Refine this crude form, coax from its stubbornness the promise of sharpness and resilience hidden beneath layers of roughness. You knew that each file stroke, each careful edge, was not just about shaping steel. It was about reining in the restless chaos of the world and molding it into order. You pulled the blade closer to the pale light, filtering through the window pane. Dust particles floated lazily in the beam, like tiny ghosts dancing in absence of wind. The light touched the metal's surface and revealed a patchwork of textures. Smooth glimmers, dull patches, microscopic ridges imperfectly aligned. You exhaled slowly, the breath lingering like a soft fog between you and that simple piece of metal poised in your hands. Your fingers traced the blade once more gently this time, mapping every contour and minute imperfection. The coolness of the steel seeped in contrast through your calloused skin, fragile and permanent at once. The far-off sounds of the day's fading life, a bird's distant call, a faint rumble of footsteps on a dirt path, seeped inside the workshop, layering the stillness with muted reminders of a world that kept turning without pause. As the minutes stretched, the silence thickened, not just around you, but inside. The forge's glowing heart began to dwindle, flickering fragile wisps of orange and yellow as embers bled their last heat. You paused, hands steady on the worn handle of the hammer, eyes flicking back to the anvil, to the blade that lay between beginnings and endings. The air had settled into a dense embrace now, a velvet weight that pressed evenly across your shoulders. Even the sounds of the night outside, the rustle of leaves, the subtle crack of distant twigs, felt muted beneath a heavy blanket of anticipation. Suddenly, the faintest murmur touched your hearing, almost lost in the surrounding stillness. You froze, the hammer suspended mid-air. The shift was imperceptible, a sound so slight it could have been the settling of the old wood, or the whisper of a distant wind crawling under the door. Yet, your skin prickled with a sudden awareness, as if the night itself had drawn a breath just before exhaling something unseen. You turned slowly toward the workshop entrance, every sense alert to the slightest hint of motion. The cool draft that slipped in carried with it a new scent, unfamiliar, subtle, edged with damp stone and something softer, like distant moss or forgotten earth. The dim light revealed nothing concrete, only the gentle sway of shadows behind the doorframe, objects caught in the sway of something just beyond sight. Your heart, steady yet watchful, settled into an uneasy rhythm. The moments stretched thin between the known and the unknown, between the laborious craft of your hands and the murmurs of the world outside that seemed to whisper of change. You knew then, in the quiet of that fading glow, that the forge's embrace was loosening, and whatever awaited beyond your walls was about to cross from shadow into substance. Your breath caught as subtle sounds, soft footsteps, a barely audible scrape, confirmed what your instincts had already sensed. With a slow, deliberate motion, you shifted the hammer back onto the anvil, the metal cool beneath your palm. The night seemed to pulse around you, alive, in. It's quiet, holding its breath just as you did, and in the darkness, something began to move. You held your breath as the shadows thickened just beyond the threshold, the fragile glow of embers retreating, withdrawing their warmth like a slow tide pulling away from the shore. The air shifted, colder now, tracing icy fingers along your skin, slipping beneath the rough fabric of your shirt and seeping deep into muscles weary from the day's relentless rhythm. Your fingers, still clutching the handle of the hammer, trembled slightly, not from fatigue, but from the sudden, unspoken weight settling in the silence. The workshop was a cocoon of faint sounds and muted scents. The lingering aroma of smoldering charcoal mingled with a subtle dampness creeping in through the cracks, a reminder of the night's slow march toward deeper shadows. Somewhere outside, wind whispered against the walls, as if bearing secrets you were not yet meant to hear. The wooden beams groaned softly, settling with age and strain, while your own breath echoed steady, punctuating the stillness like a slow drumbeat. You moved with deliberate care, each step muffled by the thick layer of dust and soot blanketing the floor. The hammer was lowered gently onto the anvil's broad surface. The faint ring that followed, swallowed by the heavy air. Your eyes searched the dimness, adjusting to the cool light filtering past the curtain of shadows. There, on the workbench, the blade rested, its surface cool and uneven, shadows pooling in every groove and ridge. Your fingertips traced the edge, lingering over the fine imperfections that marred its surface, like faint scars marking the burdens of creation. The cold sheen of the steel pressed against warm flesh, a quiet reminder of the fragile balance between destruction and renewal. Each minute scratch, every subtle dip in the metal, was a story etched silently, impossible to ignore. You inhaled slowly, drawing the humid night air deep into your lungs, the taste sharp and earthy, thick with the promise of rain. The scent carried something else, a faint, elusive hint of moss and whetstone, a whisper from the outside urging you to listen more closely. Your gaze drifted toward the narrow window, where pale moonlight spilled uncertainly, breaking the monotony of black with soft, silver strokes. Dust motes floated like delicate spirits in the glow, suspended and motionless, each one a slow, deliberate motion, frozen in time. Your hand fell to the pile of tools, resting nearby, fingers curling around a file, worn smooth by countless hours. It felt familiar, solid, an extension of your own effort and patience. You brought it to the blade with infinite slowness, starting the first strokes that would smooth the harshness, the ragged edges grudgingly yielding to the careful caress. The rasping sound cut through the night as metal met metal, each pass deliberate, unhurried. The weight of each movement settled across your shoulders. A deliberate ritual repeated in silence and sweat. With every long, measured stroke, you felt the blade's shape soften, the raw anger of the forge's fury shrinking beneath your poised insistence. The room pulsed faintly with the echo of your work, the rasp of the file, your steady breathing, the subtle creak of the wooden floor beneath. Outside, the world murmured. Faintly, the distant hoot of an owl, leaves shuddering as a breeze hurried past. Inside, time slowed further, folding upon itself like layers of smoke, twisting skyward. You leaned closer to the blade, eyes narrowing as the faint contours began to take form. The metal's surface transforming from chaotic roughness to something quieter, more exacting. A faint glow returned to the ember bed in the corner of the forge, flickering weak but persistent. The warmth curled in hesitant streams around your ankles, a reminder of the relentless presence just beyond sight. You looked up briefly, sensing the sweep of shadow retreating to the walls, folding in on itself like the closing of a heavy curtain. A subtle shift in the air prickled your skin, like a whisper threading between your ribs. Tiny movements flickered at the edge of your vision, shadows draped in silence. The familiar creaks and sighs of the old workshop grew sharper, louder in your awareness, as though the very bones of the building were holding their breath alongside you. The rasping of the file slowed, then ceased, your hands pausing as your senses reached outward, tracing the intangible. Your heart beat steady, but alert, a slow pulse beneath your ribs, mingling with the steady rhythm of the night. You stepped back, every joint settling deep into your bones like the dust beneath your feet. A tired acceptance welcomed you. The labor of the day was not yet complete, but this moment of stillness was a gift too rare to waste. Your gaze settled once more on the blade, now smoother, its edges subtly sharpened against the worn wood of the workbench. Light caught it in a fleeting glance, a glimmer of promise wrapped in cold steel. There was something sacred in this slow unveiling, each careful stroke carving out more than metal, shaping resolve and endurance. The scent of rain grew stronger outside, mixing with the lingering smoke and damp earth, filling the room with an expectant hush. Your attention was drawn to the door once more, where shadows seemed to pool deeper, darker, gathering presence with silent patience. And then, within that gathering darkness, a sudden, faint rustle, a movement so slight you might have imagined it, quickened the air. You froze, senses taut, and the blade, cool and waiting, hummed softly beneath your fingertips as if ready to speak the secrets held deep within the night. You held your breath, the fragile whisper of movement folding into the dark corners of the workshop. Your fingers curled tighter around the hammer, the warmth fading into a distant memory as the cool shadow brushed your skin like a tentative caress. Each breath you drew was slow, deliberate, as if inhaling too hastily might shatter the fragile stillness that pressed against your senses. The blade lay before you, a silent sentinel that bore the weight of your every careful motion and ancient toil. Quiet settled like dust over every surface. The workbench stained with blackened marks, the walls etched by time and flame, the air thick with the residue of fire and sweat. You stepped toward the door, feet sinking lightly into the dust that muted your movement. The faint gust outside traced icy lines along your bare forearms. Ah, stark contrast to the residue of sweat still clinging stubbornly to your skin. The scent of wet earth lingered on the breeze, hinting at rain swaddling the world beyond these walls. You hesitated, the dark threshold yawning before you like an unknown promise. Your palm brushed the rough wood, tracing the grain, steadying yourself for the step beyond. Outside, the night exhaled softly. The wind shuffled leaves in a slow, restless dance. The murmur of distant water seeping faintly through the hours. You felt the cold moisture settle deep into your bones, the wet touch of grass beneath your boots, and the ache of solitude wrapping its slow fingers around your chest. The lantern's glow retreated behind you, shrinking the circle of warmth to a dim ember against the sweeping black. You moved forward nonetheless, each step measured and slow, as if a sudden rush might shatter the fragile thread of safety you clung to. The landscape lay quiet and muted beneath a canvas of clouds veiling the moonlight. Shadows pooled in the hollows of the land like soft, ink-stained patches, merging with the low hum of insects droning gently in the damp air. Your senses sharpened, attuned to the faintest stirrings, the crack of a twig bending too far, the rustle of a distant creature slipping across underbrush, the steady pulse of your heart contained beneath ribs taut with tension. The world felt vast and holding its breath, an expanse both inviting and laden with unseen trials. You traced your path toward the boundary where the trees gathered, a wall of limbs and leaves woven tight in the cloak of night. Your fingers, rough and calloused, clenched and unclenched at your sides as you scanned the dark outline between earth and sky. A cool mist curled low, mingling with the scent of moss and old ark, pressing against your face like the whisper of a forgotten voice urging caution. With each step, the ground beneath shifted subtly, slick with dew and scattered twigs that whispered warnings beneath your boots. You slowed further, a footfall taking forever, to press down, to release, to step again. The world compressed to the sound of your breathing, shallow and uneven, and a distant, faint crack echoed too sharply, jagged enough to fracture the rhythm you held so desperately. You froze. The night did not answer your stillness with sound, only the soft sigh of the wind threading through branches overhead. Your gaze darted along the shadowed trunks, searching for a movement, a shape, anything beyond the slow pulse of your own fear. The dark held firm, stretching deeper and more silent than before, as if swallowing the world whole between heartbeats. Minutes passed, or was it hours? Time warped in the cool embrace of night, dilating until every second felt both infinite and weighted with urgency. You bent to brush a single leaf from your path. Presently, cherry your path and bring it back to your night, its brittle edges rough, like the leather worn thin beneath your fingernails. The rusted scent of earth reached your nostrils again, grounding you in the present moment, even as the silence pressed heavier. Ahead, the forest seemed to breathe, the breath of leaves whispering soft secrets you could not quite grasp. You reached for a small knife strapped to your belt, the blade cool and reassuring against your palm. Slowly, you drew it free, the metal singing a faint note as it cleared its sheath. The weight settled into your hand, a balance of sharp, silent promise and fragile defense. You knew better than to trust the blade as a savior, but it was a tether, a reminder that your survival depended not just on strength, but on patience and care. The path narrowed beneath shifting boughs, the canopy blotting out what little light the night offered. Your boots dipped into soft soil, the moisture oozing between cracks and crevices, seeping cold through the worn soles. The chorus of nighttime creatures grew louder, distant eyes glinting between the trees like stars fallen to earth, watching, waiting. Your fingers trembled slightly, not from cold, but an accumulation of shadows crowding your thoughts. Suddenly, a breeze swept through, carrying a memory of flame. That smoky, stubborn warmth from the forge, distant yet unmistakable. It wrapped around you for a heartbeat, a fragile ember against the chill. You clung to it, that small pulse of heat, and let it steady your breath. The forest held its secrets tightly, but in that moment, you felt a flicker of resolve, cool and quiet, grounding you. Then, from the depths of darkness just ahead, a whisper rose, not of words, but of movement, delicate and deliberate. Something shifted between the trees, too smooth and too soft for anything crude or loud. Your gaze fixed on the space where shadow thickened and thinned like a living veil. Heart steady, breaths long and slow, you felt the weight of anticipation settle like cold stone deep in your chest, and somewhere in that weaving dark, something waited, patient and unseen, ready to emerge with the coming dawn. The chill of night deepened as you pressed forward into the shadowed embrace of the forest. The damp earth yielded quietly beneath your boots, soft and unyielding at once, pressed down by countless rains and cold, weaving a tapestry of decay and growth beneath a tangle of roots and fallen leaves. The mist drifted low, weaving tendrils around your ankles, sticky and cool, a slow caress that folded into the dull ache gathering across your muscles. Your breath came out in shallow wisps, mingling with the damp air that tasted faintly of moss and ancient bark. Each inhalation was a slow step, a labor of will, against the tug of fatigue curling through your limbs. The forest around you was a patchwork of muted grays and deep blacks, the pale moonlight barely piercing the canopy's dense weave. Leaves whispered their own quiet stories, their edges crisp and brittle, like forgotten pages pressed beneath your tread. Every sound was stretched, exaggerated in the stillness. The rustle of twigs bending too far, the soft brush of creatures unseen slipping just beyond sight. Shadows folded and unfolded like breath, thickening and thinning in the pale surface cold and mottled beneath your skin. The texture was uneven, its grooves like the furrows etched deep in your own palms after days of relentless hammering. There was something ancient here, a steadfastness carried in the twisting limbs and the steady pulse of life hidden beneath cracked bark and rotting leaves. It grounded you, offering a silent reassurance as the cold night pressed inward. A cool breeze threaded through the branches, carrying with it a faint hint of rain. Earthy and sharp, it sliced through the heaviness and reached for your skin, coaxing goosebumps along your arms. The air thickened around you, a slow swell of moisture, mingling with the scent of soot and fading embers tucked inside your memories. It was a reminder of fires long since dimmed, and yet the glow of creation never quite extinguished, hovering quietly beneath the surface of the world. The path beneath your feet narrowed as you stepped deeper into the forest's clasp, tangled roots weaving across the soil like the veins of the earth itself. Your boots brushed aside scattered leaves, damp and curling at their edges, each one whispering faint echoes of seasons past. The distant chorus of night creatures rose in tentative melody, the thin call of a lone owl, the murmured stir of insects warming to life beneath the thick canopy. Your senses sharpened in that dim expanse. Every shift in shadow, every distant rustle became a note in a fragile symphony of presence and absence. You moved with a ghost's careful step, muscles taut with quiet anticipation, eyes narrowing in the dim silver light that pooled like spilled mercury between the trunks. The woven branches above filtered the moonlight into broken shards, casting patterns that danced like slow flames on the shifting ground. A scent, subtle and almost carried on the breath of the wind, reached your nostrils. It was a whisper of smoke, barely a curl of something burning, smoldering far away beyond sight, and with it came a trace of warmth, fragile but unmistakable. The contrast was sharp and immediate. Here, the chill pressed cold down your spine. There, the memory of heat flickered, the fading ember hidden in shadow. You paused beneath an ancient oak, its roots thick and tangled, a natural throne carved from the earth's own hands. The air here was thick with the scent of damp wood and soil, intangible and heavy. Fingers uncurled from the cold knife strapped to your hip, the metal. Weight grounding you once more in this silent world, woven from shadow and guarded breath. Slowly, you crouch down, fingertips tracing the wet leaves scattered beneath your feet, their edges pressed faintly into the muddy ground, flimsy shields against the slow march of time. The forest held you in its breath, waiting, patient and unmoving. Your heart followed the slow beat of Earth's own pulse, steady, tireless, ancient and unwavering. A distant murmur rose, no more than a breath, branches shifting, a subtle fracture in the quiet, as if the night was releasing a secret held tight for too long. Your gaze snapped to the dark line between trees, muscles tensed like coiled springs. The air thickened further, scent and shadow mingling in a slow crescendo against your skin. There, caught between two great trunks, a movement stirred, fluid and deliberate. The faint rustle of fabric, or perhaps the brushing of leaves against something alive and waiting, reached your ears. Your breath caught, held tight like a thread stretched taut against the inevitable pull of the night. You rose slowly to your feet, every sense alert, fingers tightening briefly around the cold knife's hilt. Your eyes swept the darkness, seeking shapes hidden beyond the silver wash of moonlight, but finding only shifting shadows and the slow, dancing sway of branches. Yet you knew, without looking, that something was watching, silent, patient, threading its presence into the fabric of the forest. The rain began then, a soft stumble of droplets, falling like whispered confessions from the sky, pattering first on leaves, then on earth, growing in steady pulse. The scent of whetstone and moss rose sharply, mingling with the smoldering trace of distant fire, weaving a cool thread through the heavy night air. You felt the moments stretch, fragile, lingering, pregnant with the promise of change. As the rain sank into the soil beneath your boots, the shadows between the trees quivered once more, something shifting, crossing the threshold from stillness into motion. You stood, breath suspended, senses peeled back to bare awareness, as the night folded around you like a closing curtain. And just beyond the reach of your sight, in the deep hollow where darkness gathered thickest, a shape began to take form, patient, waiting and slowly stepping out of shadow into the quiet dawn that yet lay beyond the night. You stepped back from the ancient oak, the dampness clinging to your boots seeping slowly upwards, the cool earth pressing a quiet resistance beneath every careful footfall. The rain had settled into a soft sigh, the drops now a gentle pattering that wove music into the stillness, coaxing a calm over the landscape as if the heavens were drawing a slow curtain over the world. Each breath you took was thick with the scent of wet moss and settling dust, a primal mixture of life and decay that settled deep into your lungs, steadying the restless beat within your chest. The forest around you breathed with a subtle pulse, shadows curling and uncurling like slow smoke trailing from a dying fire. The gnarled branches overhead wove a frail lattice of darkness that filtered the waning moonlight into fractured beams, thin and uneven as the scattered whispers of forgotten tales. The wet leaves beneath your fingertips, pressed, cool and fragile, textured like torn parchment on the verge of dissolving. Your senses sharpened further, drinking in the cold clarity of the night. Each sound, a distant splash, the faint rustle of a creature's movement, woven into the steady rhythm of suspense. Ahead, the tree lines stretched tight, a wall of limbs knotted together by ancient growth, hiding the secrets you could only guess at. You felt the sharpness of the knife's hilt beneath your fingers again, its cold firmness, a tether to the world of shape and certainty amid the shifting shadows around you. Your fingers brushed the blade's edge, smooth now, after countless careful strokes back in the forge, a quiet promise of precision and resilience that steadied your resolve. With slow, resolute steps, you edged closer to the threshold where night seemed to deepen. Beyond knowing, the air thickening with the moist breath of earth and wood. The muted luminescence of moss clung to the bark in soft clusters, gleaming faintly like tiny stars caught beneath the night's dense fabric. A subtle gradient of dampness soaked into your sleeves, chilling but bracing as it pressed cold reminders against the warmth still pulsing deep within. The scent of smoke, barely a wisp, drifted faintly past your nostrils, carrying a thread of something past, a lingering ember that defied the darkness. Your gaze fixed on the narrowing path, worn smooth by countless footsteps no longer present, its edges softening under layers of leaf litter and mud. The moment stretched, heavy with expectancy, as your heartbeat slowed to blend with the sounds of the night. Whispers of wind threading through leaves, the distant murmur of water. Slipping over stone, the near-silent shuffle of a small creature startled and gone. You crouched low, fingers tracing the moist ground where a faint print caught your eye. Small, elongated, the imprint of something living, careful yet deliberate. The cool soil yielded a memory of recent presence, fresh and stirring beneath the cloak of darkness. A fragile tension caught between the quiet reassurance of the familiar and the teasing pull of the unknown. Suddenly, a breath of air shifted as the underbrush stirred just beyond the focus of your vision. The movement was fluid, shadow folding into shadow, fleeting and deliberate. You froze, senses taut, as the space around you seemed to hold a silent conversation with itself, a rustling exchange between the living earth and whatever dwelled deep within. The knife's weight grounded you, its cool metal, a steady pulse against your palm, while the darkness thickened like slow rolling smoke curling inward. Each second elongating, stretching thin, breath drawn and held on the cusp of a secret waiting to be revealed. The wet scent of earth, interlaced with the faintest trace of smoke, grew stronger, a fragile ember hidden in the layered quiet. Then, as your eyes adjusted, a fragment of movement emerged, graceful and silent, from behind a tangled weave of branches. Something stepped out, not with haste, but with quiet deliberation, as though the night itself had breathed life into form. The silhouette was lithe, its outline blending seamlessly with the forest's dusk, eyes reflecting a subtle glimmer, piercing, watchful, alive. You stood slowly, every muscle coiled, breath steady, yet suspended. The air carried a chill that slow throb of adrenaline, tempered by careful patience. A distant rumble of thunder whispered low on the horizon, promising rain but holding back, as if the storm also dared not disrupt the fragile balance in this secret meeting. The figure held still, neither stepping forward nor retreating, caught between two worlds, the safety of night's concealment and the slow unraveling of dawn's promise. Your pulse echoed the silent dialogue, the fragile thread of understanding woven through absence and presence. You blinked, and for a fleeting moment, the shape seemed to waver, like mist caught in a breeze, before solidifying once more into a figure both elusive and commanding, a living shadow tethered to the pulse of this ancient forest. With a slow exhale, the silence folded tight again around you, the lingering mist rising to wrap the clearing in a soft veil. Somewhere beyond the tangled branches, the first hesitant streaks of dawn bled faintly into the sky, brushing pale colors across the horizon. And as the gray light crept over the land, the figure stepped forward, just a single deliberate movement, before vanishing into the morning mist, leaving behind only the echo of breath and a silence more profound than before. The mist clung to your skin like a soft shroud as you stepped away from the ancient oak, your boots sinking gently into the sodden earth with each measured step. The rain had softened into a quiet patter, threading a slow rhythm through the dense canopy above, muffling the usual night sounds into a cozy, low hum. The scent of wet moss and freshly turned soil filled your lungs, heavy and cool, anchoring your breath to the moment in a way deeper than mere awareness. The air pressed around you, thick with the aftermath of rain, weaving fingers of moisture through the fabric at your sleeves and settling cold against your wrists. You felt the steady weight of the knife at your side, its smooth metal a reminder of precise control amid the shadows gathering like silent spectators. The forest itself seemed to hold its breath with you, the tangled branches overhead weaving long, fragile fingers of shadow that fractured the pale silvery light, spilling uncertainly through the clouds. You paused where the path narrowed sharply, the dirt smoothed and worn by countless footsteps, now erased by the rain's tender assault. The fading light caught the curves of wet leaves pressed to the ground, fragile and whisper-thin, their edges curling like fragile parchment cradled by time. The subtle scent of charred wood lingered faintly on the breeze, a smoky signature faintly tethering you to the forge's warmth, long since withdrawn, a fragile ember lost within the damp. Each movement became a slow unfold. Your hands brushed the coarse bark of a nearby tree, rough and mottled beneath your skin, its ancient grooves like carved maps tracing the pulse of time itself. The chill of the night seeped downward, cleaving to muscle and bone, but you welcomed it, an honest, tangible sensation amid the swirling uncertainty. Your breath rose and fell in a steady, deliberate cadence. The distant flutter of wings, the faint scrape of underbrush, a subtle sigh threading through branches seemed to crescendo, then fade, folded back within the forest's vast embrace. You felt the tension coiling quietly. In your belly, a slow hum beneath your ribs that kept time with the soft crunch of fallen twigs beneath your boots. A slender shaft of moonlight broke through a shifting cloud, casting a fleeting spotlight on the darkened earth before you. Dust motes floated lazily in the glow, suspended like tiny ghosts caught between waking and dream. You traced the path farther, each step measured and unhurried, clinging to the fragile stillness before what might come. Your fingers tightened around the hilt of your knife, the cold metal steady and sure against your palm. The blade gleamed faintly in the muted light as you drew it free, releasing a slow whispered note that traced the night's thin silence. The forest shifted again, whispered secrets threading through leaves and shadows, as if the very air had grown thick with anticipation. Between two gnarled birches, a movement flickered, soft and deliberate. You held your breath, eyes narrowing, every sense reaching outward into the dim tapestry of the woods. The shape that emerged was slight and graceful, its edges blending with the shifting shadows, like a ripple on otherwise still water. Your heartbeat slowed, matching the forest's slow pulse, patient, watchful. A breath of wind stirred the leaves at your feet, carrying the layered scent of earth smoke, and something faintly sweet, like distant jasmine, carried on a forgotten summer breeze. You felt time curl and stretch, the night folding in upon itself as the figure stepped fully into the narrow clearing. The eyes that met yours glimmered sharp and unblinking, deep pools reflecting the soft silver light, alive with quiet knowledge and something you could not yet name. The figure's form was cloaked in shadow and mist, limbs fluid beneath a tapestry of dark cloth that seemed woven from night itself. Every subtle movement spoke of patience, of waiting and watching beneath layers of silence. You lowered the knife slowly, your fingers brushing the cool steel as if grounding yourself to known things in a world shifting beneath your feet. The forest breathed around you, shadows and light interlacing in a fragile dance, neither threatening nor welcoming, simply present and waiting. A soft murmur echoed just beyond the tree line, the distant rumble of thunder, gentle and distant, promising rain, yet seeming reluctant to break this fragile interlude. The air hummed faintly, alive with promise and latent power. The figure remained still, perched on the edge of daybreak and darkness, a living fragment of mystery, tethered between moments. The tension wreathed your chest like a slow, steady drumbeat, subtle but unavoidable. Raindrops mingled with mist, weaving a delicate haze that cloaked the world in silver whispers. The wooden floor of the workshop, the anvil's cold surface, all seemed far away now, replaced by the pulse of the forest, the crisp snap of twigs, and the tender weight of dawn's approach. In that hush, just before the day could break and scatter shadows like leaves blown on a breeze, the figure breathed deeply, a soft, almost imperceptible sigh carrying the scent of smoke and earth. Your breath caught, and then, with deliberate grace, the shape lifted a hand, not in greeting, but as if beckoning towards something just beyond the limits of your sight. The forest held its secret, and you stepped closer. The mist curled thick around your ankles as you stepped further into the hollow beneath the ancient oaks, each footfall slow, deliberate, muffled by layers of damp leaves pressed soft against the earth. The rain had eased into a drizzle, the gentle pattering above weaving a soft rhythm that pressed against your ears, folding the forest into a cocoon of muted sound. Your breath fogged the cool air, lingering in lazy spirals as each inhale filled your lungs with the heavy scent of wet bark and moss, the faint trace of smoke hovering like a whisper from a distant unseen fire. The path wound narrow and winding, trembling under your careful steps like a fragile thread stretched tight between shadow and faintest light. You moved with patient caution, feeling the rough bark of a low-hanging branch brush against your cheek, sticky with slick beads of water. The texture grounded you, a cool, imperfect touch amid the infinite softness of the night. The canopy above broke apart here and there, letting through slivers of diluted moonlight that scattered across the scattered stones and gnarly roots curling beneath your boots. Each step echoed faintly, swallowed quickly by the moisture-soaked air. The sound a slow drumbeat, accompanying your steady, measured pulse. The scent of earth deepened. The rich, dense aroma of decaying leaves and recent rain mingled with the crisp note of cold stone, like the bones of the world laid bare beneath your feet. You brushed rain-soaked leaves aside as you pressed on, the delicate rustle of foliage punctuating the otherwise profound quiet that pressed around you like a thick veil. In the distance, a soft murmur stirred. So slight, it might as well have been the shifting breath of the forest itself. Your fingers curled tighter around the hilt of your knife, the cold metal a steady anchor in your palm. The blade's edge, dulled by shadows, seemed to drink in the faint light, holding it in a gleam that promised sharp precision and quiet defense. The further you ventured, the more the night seemed to fold in on itself, the shadows growing deeper, thicker, a slow tide of darkness rolling in to swallow the armored shapes of gnarled trunks and tangled branches. The air grew heavier, pressing cold and damp into your chest, its weight both a burden and a strange, steadying comfort. Your eyes traced the shifting shadows, alert for the softest sign of movement. Somewhere just beyond the sweep of your vision, the forest whispered its secrets in rustling leaves and the faint crack of twigs bending beneath weight unseen. You could feel the rhythm of the world slow, stretched thin beneath the slow work of breath and heartbeats held in suspension. With each deliberate step, you felt the chill cling more stubbornly to your skin, crawling beneath your shirt sleeves and settling like a slow knot in your muscles. Your senses sharpened, the dampness coating leaves, the distant glimmer of moonlight on slick bark, the faint and fleeting scent of smoke teasing at the edge of your awareness, all weaving together into a tapestry of unease, threaded with a fragile hint of hope. A soft flicker of movement caught your eye, just beyond a thick curtain of ivy, the edges stirring like a breath caught between worlds. You froze, the knife rising slowly, your hand steady despite the cold. The figure that stepped forward within the shadow was slight, cloaked in draped fabric dark as the forest's heart, its features obscured, but eyes gleaming sharp and steady, reflecting the muted silver of the moon. For a heartbeat, time itself seemed to hold fast. The forest stilled, all sound, all stir, folding inward like the slow closing of a heavy door. Your breath hung between silence and sound, a thread pulled taut beneath the weight of what awaited. The figure's gaze did not waver, but it made no move to close the distance. Instead, it lifted a slow hand, an invitation perhaps or a warning, and then lowered it without a word, the motion fluid and deliberate. Your fingers curled tighter, but for now, your breath remained steady. The rain's soft murmur had grown a touch louder, filling the space between you with a gentle hum of suspended time. The earth beneath you throbbed quietly, the pulse of ancient growth and endless change beating through roots and soil. Then, without warning, a low, rolling rumble slicked from the distance, a grave sound rolling across the hills like distant thunder, heavy and slow, as if the bones of the world were shifting. The figure blinked slowly, the sharp glimmer of its eyes deepening into something unreadable. In that instant, the shadows around you seemed to tighten, folding the night in close. You steadied your breath, muscles taut but calm, as the rain tapered to a fine mist, drifting cool and soft across your skin. The forest whispered once more, weaving its spectral threads around you both, weaving you into its slow, centuries-old rhythm. The figure stepped a single pace closer, a movement so slight it might have been a trick of light. And then it vanished, gone, swallowed into the gathering mist, as though never truly present. All that remained was the echo of breath and the scent of rain-soaked earth, tangled with the faint, ghostly wisp of smoke carried gently on the cold night breeze. And as the first pale fingers of dawn began to press against the horizon, you stood alone, the forest humming softly in the spaces between heartbeats, waiting, watching, silent. You held your breath as the figure stepped forward, the mist swirling around its form like a living veil. There was no rush, no urgency, only a deliberate grace that echoed the steady cadence you had come to know in the forge and the forest. The eyes that met yours were not wild or hostile, but edged with quiet wisdom, a reflection of patience honed over countless nights, just like this one. The knife at your side felt heavier now, not from fear, but from the weight of understanding settling deep within. This presence, so woven into the shadows and the soil, was a boundary neither to be crossed nor ignored, but respected. It spoke of cycles unfolding and refolding without haste, of stories hidden beneath layers of bark and earth, waiting for the right hands to listen. For a long moment, you and the figure remained still, two shapes caught in the silence between heartbeats, connected by the soft hum of rain and the faint, steady pulse of the earth beneath your boots. The forest seemed to lean in, holding tight its ancient breath, as if aware that something quietly sacred was unfolding. Slowly, the figure turned, its movement a whisper against the leaves. The cloak of night and mist swirled as it stepped back toward the deeper woods, disappearing between the trunks with the same patient rhythm that had marked every step before. The sharp gleam of its gaze lingered for a heartbeat more, a silent promise or a farewell. You stood alone in the growing light. The rain softened now to a gentle drizzle, and the first hints of dawn tracing pale strokes across the sky. The world exhaled around you, releasing a long-held tension, like a slow, cleansing breath. The cold dampness clung lightly, but no longer bit. It was a balm, weaving a sense of peace beneath your worn muscles and tired bones. Your gaze returned to the path behind you, the place where the forge's warmth had first met the chill night air. The blade, now resting safely in your hand, felt lighter, as if the weight of its making had lessened in the presence of this quiet encounter. It was no longer just metal, shaped by fire and hammer, but a keeper of stories, some spoken, others whispered beneath the boughs. Each breath you drew filled your lungs with the soft scent of earth and rain, grounding you in a moment that was both ending and beginning. The pounding heat of the forge, the relentless rhythm of the hammer, it all felt like a fading song, replaced by this gentle hum of renewal. You could almost hear the slow rustle of leaves being rewritten by the wind, a lullaby for the hard-won calm. The woods eroded their shadows as the sun climbed steadily, scattering droplets of mist like scattered dust. The world had shifted while you stood there, still and watching, a quiet witness to the unfolding dawn. The deep roots beneath the soil held tight to the earth's heartbeat, steady and sure, much like your own. With a final, slow exhale, you turned away from the forest's edge and made your way back to the clearing where the workshop waited. The familiar scent of smoldering ash and worn leather greeted you softly, grounding you once more in the tangible world of sweat and craft. The anvil, cold now but stoic, bore silent witness to the journey, the beginning that had led here, to this fragile piece. You touched the blade lightly against the anvil's surface, a fleeting echo of the hammer's final strike. The metal shimmered faintly, cold and resolute, ready for whatever rhythms awaited. The heat may have faded, but the fire within endured, quiet and steady, like a last ember buried deep beneath ash. Outside was a gentle wash of soft grays and pale blues. The air was cooler now, layered with the sweetness of wet grass and distant flowers still closed against the early light. Somewhere, birds began their morning chorus, delicate notes threading through the coolness in a slow awakening. The world was turning, unhurried, carrying both memory and promise. As you settled into the quiet that followed, the day's weariness softened around your shoulders, like a well-worn cloak. The weight of the forge was no longer an oppressive heat, but a steady warmth nestled deep, an ember you carried with you, a silent companion in the slow unfolding of all tomorrows. And as your eyes closed briefly, the gentle rhythm of your breath matched the soft pulse of the earth beneath, a lullaby that stretched across time and space, binding past, present, and future in a tranquil embrace. The story had found its rest. The night's secrets had been met with calm, the unknown welcomed with patience. All that remained was the quiet unfolding of dawn, the slow turning of the world, and the comforting certainty of a new day. And with that, you let yourself drift, carried softly on the breath of the morning, held in the warm stillness of peace at last.